Hello, y'all, and welcome back to the BirthFit podcast. I'm Dr. Lindsay Matthews Cantu, and we're on episode, let me see if I can remember, number 237. And
Wow.
we're getting into some preconception talk. And before we dive in, before I introduce the guest, just a reminder, our BirthFit podcast is brought to you by our nonprofit. Go visit our nonprofit website, nonprofit.birthfit.com. Yes, very original. And our goal, our main objective with the nonprofit is to support those in the military here in the United States that are either active duty or their spouse is active duty with a birth doula or a postpartum doula. So get over there, donate $5, apply if you are in the military. We really want to support you, and the military is near and dear to our hearts, as we've had tons of women come through, do our programs to get back to their physical fitness level, to pass their physical fitness test. We've had military moms work on some of the coach content for us. So yes, military is near and dear to our heart. Oh, and she's already wanting me. So yeah, check out our nonprofit. And yeah, let me hit pause just for a sec. All right, now we're back. But yeah, before we dive in, I'm going to read Anisa's bio because it is awesome. And, one of the things that I always get questions about is preconception. And, I've had it on my list of things to make a program for over the last freaking decade. But mainly because there was nothing out there that I liked. And then Anisa pops up with her preconception work. I'm like, this is legit. Like, she gets it. She's got the right mindset. She's got everything going on. So why, there's no reason for me to, do a preconception program now when there's one out there, and one that gets the real food, that gets the exercise, gets the freaking mom life. So let me dive in and we'll get started with the episode. Anisa is a holistically-minded certified nutritionist and mom of two very adventurous boys living in the Pacific Northwest. Ooh, our girl Hannah used to live up there. Her life's purpose is to inspire and educate women to live and eat and move with intention and confidence so that they can create the family of their dreams and thrive along the journey. Beautiful. Whew. Okay, learning over time that extreme restrictive diets are fear-inducing and unsustainable. Yes, and I can't wait to get into that. Anisa places her focus on optimizing nutrient-dense foods, animal-based approach, and an approach she's found to serve her own hormone healing and journey that many of her hormone healing journey and that of many of her clients. So Anisa is all about identifying and addressing the smoke before your house is burning down. I love that, and has taken a keen ability to listen and pinpoint areas of improvement that helps her clients heal. So, Anisa, welcome.
Thank you for having me here. And it's, I think the fact that, you said you resonate so well with my approach. I will say, I did the BirthFit professionals seminar back in 2017. My son was 3 months old.
Dang, girl, you were like an OG.
Yeah, I was the only nutritionist there, and I was so proud that I was like, yeah, I because there was a small bit on nutrition, that they had taught in the professionals seminar, and I was like, yes, this is totally in line with what I teach, and I've been a big supporter of of BirthFit. I recommend it in my course because kind of on the other side for me is yes, I have part of my bachelor's degree is in nutrition and in exercise science as well. And I have a lot of background in exercise and athletics and stuff. But nutrition is kind of my main thing. And so I was like, I'm going to refer out to BirthFit because they're doing everything that, much more than I would be able to serve my clients with. So I love that we can kind of collaborate.
I love that. It's so wild. All of my guests so far this year have taken a BirthFit seminar in 2017. And I didn't even realize it, until we started talking. But that's the first year the seminars launched. And that was kind of like the launching of BirthFit and me being like, okay, let's see if this works. And
Yeah.
so far, so good, I guess.
Yeah. It's been great. I've met a lot of cool, like, local providers that way. And yeah, it was just a
Awesome.
great, like, opportunity.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, maybe I'll just introduce myself a little
Yes, I
bit.
would love to know how you got into this work. Yeah, because usually it's a calling for people, and I bet that's pretty similar for you.
Yeah. So, initially, I was called to become a nutritionist. I didn't have the, like, fertility and pregnancy specialization yet. Ironically, I was vegetarian, and like many other vegetarians, they want to tell other people that they should also become vegetarian. And so I decided to go to school for nutrition and exercise science because I found that both are necessary and important for overall health. And I went to Bastyr University here in the Seattle area. And ironically, when I got to school, I assumed everybody was going to be vegetarian, and I was the only person in my class who, we had
What?
we had a special, one of our cooking classes. We were in the lab, and it was in the kitchen, and I had to go into this, like, special dietary preferences group, and I was like, "What? Like, we're cooking with things like tofu and tempeh, which I didn't like. Like, I still ate a very, like, whole foods based kind of vegetarian diet at the time. Like, I mostly just ate legumes and eggs and dairy as my main sources of protein. So I was like, tempeh is not real food. I don't know what this is.
That's
and
amazing.
and then I was like, well, what is everybody else cooking with if they're not, vegetarian? And they were cooking with, like, wild caught salmon and pasture raised chicken and grass fed beef. And I was like, wait a second, like, this is a thing. Like, there's this middle ground where, like, not everything is conventionally raised, right? The way we understand it, of, like, animals are in factory farms all the time. They're being pumped up with hormones and, antibiotics and all that kind of stuff all the time. And I was like, that kind of, like, piqued my interest of, like, okay, so maybe you can have animal foods as part of your diet without it being like this, extreme, poor animal, animal humane situation, right? Or how do I say it? But it's kind of one of those things where that really, like, piqued my interest, and so that was one of the seeds that had been planted. Um, and as I was going through my initial education, I started learning, like, how the different nutrients work in the body. And pretty much every nutrient, when it comes down to it, there's plant-based versions of it and there's animal-based versions of it. And with all of them, the animal-based versions were more bioavailable, more, digestible, more absorbable, and we utilize them better. And I was like, wait, what? And so that was kind of another big, like, red flag for me. I was like, okay, so maybe what I'm thinking is not actually true, right? I was very naive at the time. I was just doing what the headline said, right? Which is what a lot of people do. Um, and and then the third kind of straw that broke the camel's back, I guess, was that my health was rock bottom, and it had been very normalized in the sense that, like, you tell somebody you have period pain, they're like, oh, okay, like, that's normal. Or I'm tired all the time. Or, I'm getting dizzy and fainting. Or am forgetful. And, like, a lot of those things, I was like, oh, that's just me. That's just how I am. I'm just clumsy. Like, I can't remember things. Like, that became part of my, like, personality and how I identified in my friends groups. And it wasn't until I met my husband, who was at the time in school to become a naturopathic doctor, and he was very, very good at, like, not saying, like, hey, you need to change your diet or whatever. He was like, he's very good at, like, motivational interviewing, where he would ask questions and be like, hey, how's that working for you? Or, and so I was like, okay, he was like, well, period pain is not normal. You shouldn't be, crying in the fetal position every month, and you should have energy. Especially at that time, I was like 19 years old. And so I should have a high libido. I had zero. I should have, fertility signs. I had zero cervical mucus, right? And I started learning about these things over time. I was like, wait a second, like, my health actually is really not good right now. And And it was shocking how quick the transition happened. He was like, there was I think the turning point for me was I tried a bite of some of his food. We had gone to this Indian restaurant and it had like lamb soaked broth or like lamb broth soaked in the rice. And I was like, oh, let me taste your rice or whatever. And I was like, what is that flavor? And I'm half Persian, as my heritage. And lamb is like one of the most used meats in Persian cooking. And it was a flavor that like
Your
it
body was like
took me.
craving it.
Yeah, and it took me back. I was like, "What is that?" Like, it felt like my body was just like or my memory, my internal memory, like, jumped back, like, 1,000 years. I was like, "Wait a second, my body needs this." And he's like, "Oh, it's just the lamb broth from the curry or whatever." And I was like, "Okay." So the whole time we were driving home, we talked about, "Okay, how do I, test this out?" He's like, "Try it for 30 days. What's the worst that can happen? You're already rock bottom." And so I was like, yeah, you're right. Like I have to just get over my pride. And because I think when you're studying nutrition, it is a very like most vegetarians have this pridefulness around it too. But especially if I'm like, this is like what I'm going to be teaching other people, I was like, okay, if this is not working for me, I have to really like swallow my pride and think, okay, it might be my diet that's making me feel this way. And so um, we downloaded like some kind of 30-day paleo cleanse or
Yeah.
whatever, and I just followed the meal plan. And I started making bone broth. I started, having meat for breakfast and making liver pate and like all the things, right? And I was shockingly better. Like my energy, like I wasn't hungry throughout the day. I wasn't craving carbs. I had to eat every hour before that.
Mm.
Um, it took me about 3 months for me to like see a significant difference in my memory. And I found this to be the case when I was like, doing tests in because I was in college at the time and I would be studying really hard for my exams and performing really poorly prior to that. And then I was like, wait, I don't have to study as long and I'm performing way better than, like I'm
Yeah,
recalling
that's
things
awesome.
better. I wasn't clumsy anymore. Like my period pain went away. Like literally every
Oh,
symptom that I had disappeared. And
that's awesome.
for the most part, right? I
Yeah.
got probably 90% better. And then after that 90% improvement, we found out that I had Lyme disease. We treated that and I was 100%.
Dang. Yeah, almost like you had to take off the surface level or deal with the surface level and then get underneath a little more, underneath the hood a little more.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Oh,
I always tell people, it's like a lot of times people think like, oh, my fertility can't improve as I age. I'm like, well, I was 19 years old. I had zero fertility signs. Like I had a regular cycle,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
had lots of cycle symptoms, the
yeah.
PMS, like everything.
Dang.
And now it's like I have great fertility signs. I'm
Yeah,
in my 30s, I don't have any cycle symptoms. I have great energy, especially to keep up with two boys.
yeah.
And yeah, so and it's like it's definitely possible for people. So I think that gives people a lot of hope.
I love that. Um, One of the questions, so we'll dive into this because you touched on this, was what are the biggest signs of fertility? So if somebody's listening right now, what should they be looking for? And then to follow up on that, how soon should they prepare for conception? If they're like, I just want to know if I'm fertile, but we're just getting married, let's wait a year or something, you know?
Yeah. That's a great question. So the first one, what are the signs of fertility? I would say you're looking at your cervical mucus is one of the most obvious ones because it should be happening leading up to ovulation. Depending on your age, it can vary, the amount of days. So the younger you are, typically the more cervical mucus, more days of cervical mucus you have, and that's considered your fertile period. That's the time when you can conceive. If you're trying
Yeah.
and or if you're not trying, then
Yeah.
those are the times to abstain. um, and I would say that's probably one of the primary signs to look for, but some other more secondary signs would be things like your energy levels.
Mm.
You're looking at those cycle symptoms, right? Are you having mood swings? Are you having PMS or PMDD, period cramps, fibroids, if you have something like PCOS or endometriosis, irregular cycles, right? All of those are kind of red flags that say, okay, like your fertility is not optimized and we can bring it into a better place that not only does it bring you into a more regular cycle. But the more regular your cycle is, the better your chances of having a healthy pregnancy, because that's an indication of your nutrient status and your hormone balance.
Yeah.
And another fertility sign that's important to look at is basal body temperature. That's one that it can be a little bit tedious to track if you're not used to it. I really recommend the Temp Drop armband. I find that to be the easiest way to do it. You just wear it to sleep on your arm, and then it measures your body temperature when you're
You don't have
sleeping.
to wear it throughout the day?
No,
That's
it's just
great.
at night. Yeah. And so that has been a really helpful tool for me to get a little bit more objective data for my clients where, I've had clients who they had low basal body temperature, particularly in the first half of their cycle. And that can be an indication of either poor nourishment or low thyroid. And I've seen many of my clients, as we start making changes, their follicular, their pre-ovulatory temperatures start to go up. And so those are, I think, can be really helpful for people to have that objective data to see like, okay, are the changes that we're making working? And rather than just like looking at the only outcome as like, am I pregnant or not? Right. Because it's like, maybe you're not ready to get pregnant yet, but you're making progress. Right. And it's like, I like to view it as like, in the springtime, when the buds start to show up on the plants. And, right now, like it's been really warm here, oddly in Seattle. And we're starting to see like the elderberry trees have these tiny green buds. And, it's like, we can't expect the elderberry tree to bloom like right now when the buds are just this tiny, right? It hasn't done that growth, that development yet.
Needs time.
And so if we're looking to the female body and we say, okay, what kind of signs can we look towards that are showing that we're progressing towards that blooming state, right? That, that most
That's
healthy, most fertile
great
state.
way to put that. What sign are there signs that we're heading in the direction of blooming?
Right. Yeah. And then so your second question, remind me again what it was.
How soon should one prepare?
Yeah. So that can vary depending on the person. I would say for somebody who's like optimally healthy, who's already, living a very like low tox lifestyle, they eat clean, they're eating mostly organic, eating quality foods, all like, I would say if everything's mostly optimized, your, stress is managed, you're exercising well, you've got good muscle mass on your body, 3 months would be kind of the minimum amount. Now, most people have areas of improvement. So, so I would say like, depending on where stress levels are at, what their exposures are like, if they've been on birth control, how long ago were they on birth control, what kinds of like intentional replenishment have they done since being on birth control? So I think, another thing to consider is like, do you have any other, I guess what some people call comorbidities, do you have gut disorders, like gut imbalances? A lot of people have SIBO, and that can be a barrier for people to get pregnant. Are you having skin issues or, even just different signs of, okay, hey, something's not optimal here, and so, or for me, a big one was hair loss. When I was vegetarian, I was losing a ton of hair, and I actually never lost any hair postpartum. A lot of people, they talk about having postpartum hair loss. And I'm like, okay, I know this is like supposed to be normal to lose hair postpartum. I have not lost any hair. I mean, I cut my hair because my baby was on my back and he was pulling at it a lot, but, but so I think those are some indications, some areas to look at, like, okay, the more symptoms you have, essentially the worse you feel, the more work you have to do to improve your fertility, because optimal health is very much correlated with optimal fertility. And, when you restore your health, you really heal your body, then you become into a much, much more fertile state. And, and it's one of those things where you probably have some indication of like, if you're in a state of optimal health, right? Like, how well do you handle the stressors of life? And my course is called Resilient Motherhood because like, we are supposed to experience challenges. We are supposed to test ourselves. And it's a matter of like, have we found that inner strength to be resilient, right?
Yeah.
And, how do you handle the stressors of life? Do they knock you over, or can you handle them? And that's something that when I'm working with people in the preconception period, if they feel overwhelmed by life before having a baby, I'm like, okay, we have to like
Oh God.
rearrange some things, normalize your rhythms, like just kind of get your routine set up so that you're ready to go for motherhood. Because once you add a baby to that, then things get way more complex. And, if you don't have good ways
I'm
of
like, look at
regulating
me
your
over
nervous
here right
system.
now. Way more complex.
Yeah, totally. And so it's like if you're feeling overwhelmed by the like unpredictability of like when your baby's going to need to be held, or you know maybe you're losing a little bit of sleep one night or whatever, like how do you bounce back from that, right? And it's not that we don't take rest. It's not that we are always go go go, but it's a matter of like tuning in and learning like when to do those things, right? When do you go go go? When do you rest? A lot of times I find, especially in like the home birth and free birth communities, there's this very like strong tendency towards, oh, let's be feminine and we have to, embrace our soft era. And like, that's all good and well. But like, there's also the balance of the masculine where we do need to, uh, like be strong, like physically strong and exert ourselves and challenge ourselves. And I think that there's that important piece of motherhood where if you don't have that, it can be so much harder.
Oh, I'm so glad you hit on that because I was talking to, might have been Emily Abbott the other day, like a few months ago, about this, where like the feminine, our pregnancy calls us into the feminine, but then as soon as postpartum hits, it's like you got to find that balance and that flow of feminine and masculine, especially if you're the primary caretaker and you're the stay-at-home parent or whatever, because you got to have boundaries, you got to be protective, you got to get shit done. And
Yeah.
you got to cook dinner and figure out when to, prioritize that during the day. And I loved your post the other day about cook dinner earlier in the day. And literally, that's what I started trying. And I was like, this makes so much sense. But
I
it's
mean,
finding that balance.
yeah, I mean, I definitely find I learned that pretty early on, with having a baby. It's like, okay, that 4 p.m., 5 p.m.
Oh,
time was just like all hands on deck. And
yeah,
especially when you have two kids or more, it's definitely better for everyone involved for you to be 100% present with the needs of the family and to
yeah,
not have to be focusing on food at the time.
yeah,
So I always make my meals. If it's slow cooked, I'll do it in the morning.
yeah.
If it's something that's like going in the oven or whatever, I'll usually do it at lunchtime, but it's definitely life changing.
Brilliant. Find those small little mom hacks that make the biggest difference. It's huge. Phew. Okay, so you touched on both the follicular and the luteal phase, sort of, but can you give some, and you did this already a little bit, but a little more insight into how do you know when you should address the follicular phase, and how do you know when you should address the luteal phase for some people?
Hmm.
That makes sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So that's a good question. And um, addressing one will in some ways address the other. So they're not necessarily separate, but there are definitely different strategies to take for each one. For example, like estrogen dominance is a very common state that women are in for a variety of reasons.
I'm glad you
Um,
agreed on this because that was a question too.
okay. And so what estrogen dominance is for women who haven't heard of it is that generally you have a higher, too high, an excess level of estrogen compared to your progesterone levels. And you might still have low estrogen, right? Like total estrogen might still be low, but it might be high relative to progesterone. And so what's important to look at is like, okay, how do we support the body's optimal balance of estrogen, right? Making enough of it, but not so much that it's overpowering the progesterone. Um, Estrogen dominance is a internal state that is associated with a lot of the symptoms I mentioned. PMS, mood swings, fibroids, PCOS, endometriosis, and the list goes on. And so it's one of those things where if you can support your body to effectively detoxify excess estrogen, then that brings your estrogen into a more healthy state. And by, we do that by supporting the liver, by supporting gut health, by, sweating and moving our bodies. And, there's all these different ways that we can support detoxifying excess estrogen. But another part of that is also making sure that we are minimizing the input, right? Like if we are taking in xenoestrogens, for example, environmental estrogens, those can take the place of estrogen in the body and, give us the same symptoms of excess estrogen. And so I think for me, that was another factor in, optimizing my hormone balance, was just cleaning up my environment. I have a workshop that I'm actually doing on estrogen dominance at the end of February. So for people, if you're dealing with some of these symptoms and you want to learn more about that, definitely like give me a follow or get on my email list so you can be in the know. But that's one of the things that is often considered in the follicular phase, is just optimizing estrogen production and elimination. Now, if we need to know, if we need to improve the luteal phase, some of the indications can be like a short luteal phase, which a lot of people don't know they have until they start tracking their basal body temperatures or, testing their ovulation, right? There's different ways to track your ovulation and to confirm it. But generally, if your luteal phase is 10 days, some say 11 days or shorter, then that's an indication that you don't have enough progesterone. Other indications may be if you're spotting before your period for a few days. Sometimes you might get mid-cycle spotting. You might be experiencing anxiety or insomnia. If you find that you're just kind of like jittery and like you can't fall asleep or you can't stay asleep, that can be related to low progesterone, particularly in the latter half of your cycle, before your period's going to come. And so sometimes you can look at the whole cycle, and it really depends on when you're ovulating. But like, let's say, for example, if you had like a 26-day cycle and you're ovulating on day 14, that might be, your luteal phase might be kind of approaching that shorter duration, right? So understanding when you're ovulating can be really helpful in understanding, okay, where's my luteal phase at? And the ideal luteal phase length for optimal fertility is 12 to 14 days long. Generally, if you're ovulating on day 14 or day 15 and you have about a 28, 29-day cycle, then you have a pretty normal luteal phase. And so, but like I have a client right now who has a 28-day cycle, but she has pre-period spotting, she has anxiety, insomnia, some of those other symptoms. And so it's like, okay, like this is not everybody presents with the exact same symptoms. Our bodies are different, right? There's a lot of bioindividuality. And so, so I think looking at the collection of symptoms and say, okay, how can we put these puzzle pieces together and support your body so that you can raise your progesterone levels? And we can do that through food. We can do that through, improving like blood flow. We can do that through improving brain to ovary communication. There's a lot of different kind of tools that we have to support this entire process.
That's awesome. I love that you hit on the bioindividuality, because like probably similar to that woman, I think, when I was tinkering with my cycle and just experimenting, one of the symptoms I had was the insomnia. But it's like I could fall asleep easily, but like I'd wake up in the middle of the night and it'd be difficult to fall back asleep. And it was all during opening a brick and mortar office. So it makes sense, like stress. You're like, oh, what do I need to do right now? But everybody's symptoms are so different. And yeah, they show up in different ways. So looking at kind of like the whole big picture of the menstrual cycle is key, and knowing when you ovulate. Woo. Okay, so you hit on these two a little bit, but let's say a woman has PCOS. What would you say are the top 3 things that she needs to do right now if she's looking to conceive?
Yeah. Top 3 things. So one of the key factors
but I said 3.
I mean, I have a whole section on PCOS in my course. So if she really wants everything, then she can check out Resilient Motherhood. But yeah, so with PCOS, there are very common underlying imbalances. And now PCOS, even within like the umbrella of PCOS, there can be different presentations, right? There's something that like one of the most common misconceptions about PCOS is that everyone's overweight. And there are a lot of women who don't have a lot of excess total body fat, but they have what's called lean PCOS. And interestingly, when you look at their body composition, they do still have excess body fat in relation to muscle mass, but they don't appear overweight. They're, I don't like this term, but some people refer to it as like skinny fat.
Yeah.
Where they might have some kind of like waist,
Yeah.
waist adiposity. And so that's kind of important to look at, but to look at both types of PCOS, some of the most important things to be addressing is blood sugar balance and inflammation and I would say muscle mass. One of the things that
That
muscle
makes
mass
sense.
can be so helpful for is supporting insulin sensitivity. Insulin resistance plays like an underlying role in about more than 80% of PCOS cases. And so this is again in women who are also not overweight or obese. And so learning how to, what I say, improve your carb tolerance, right? Some people refer to this as, improving insulin sensitivity. Not a lot of people understand what that means. And so improving your carb tolerance essentially means creating your environment to facilitate being able to handle carbohydrates better. Because it's not that there's something wrong with you. It's actually, PCOS is fascinating. It's a physiologic adaptation that was made by our ancestors so that we could get pregnant in times of scarcity, right? When there
Boom.
was,
Yeah.
it's a very wise evolutionary trait that was adopted among, cultures and places where there wasn't a lot of access to food. And in order to be able to get pregnant, we had to reduce our insulin sensitivity so that we could have more stored body fat that we could then signal to our body that says, hey, it's safe to get pregnant. We're going to have resources available. And then where that problem happens is now in this modern day world where we have an abundance of not only insulin spiking foods, but also like very hyper palatable, hyper refined insulin spiking foods. But also we are moving less, we're not putting as much muscle on our bodies. And so our environment is different. So a lot of women who have PCOS, it's like they're in a fish out of water kind of thing, right? It's like they're not in the right environment for their diet and lifestyle to be able to facilitate optimal fertility. And so one of my approaches with my PCOS clients is to help to bring them back into their fishbowl. They're for a fish out of water. To create that environment around their daily life to make it so that they can handle carbohydrates better and not have those negative repercussions of like carbs are horrible and they make me feel bad and they make me gain weight or whatever. There might be some more of that compared to a woman who doesn't have PCOS, but I definitely don't think all women with PCOS need to like eat a complete ketogenic diet 100% of the time to be able to get pregnant.
That's awesome, and probably my most favorite explanation support for PCOS I've heard.
Awesome.
You're out of your fishbowl. You're a fish out of water. That's great. So, what's your thoughts on endometriosis? Is there a section
Yeah.
on that?
I do have a section on endometriosis as well. I do find many of the people who have endometriosis also choose to work with me, like they pair it with one-on-one coaching, just because it is a little bit more, requires a little bit more like personalization. A lot of times there might be some nutrient testing, and that might be the case with PCOS as well. But I'll do Dutch hormone testing, I'll do nutrient testing with my clients if I find that it's, I usually have them make a lot of like lifestyle change first, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the testing, see like, okay, where else can we refine this? But yeah, I find endometriosis, again, estrogen dominance is a big piece for that. Inflammation is also a big piece for that. And I would also say gut health is very closely intertwined with endometriosis. Many of my endometriosis, and I'll just say endo for short. That's how a lot of people refer to it.
Yeah.
So a lot of my endo clients have IBS as well, or some level of that. Because if you think about it, right, there's these adhesions that are created really closely to the gut, and they can be creating this this physical pulling, or just kind of making it so that there might be some backtracking of microbes, from the large intestine to the small intestine. Or like usually we look at a river as like it's flowing in one direction. Our digestive system should be that way too. But sometimes if there's too much abdominal tension or adhesions, then there can be some backtracking of microbes, and that's not really a good thing. So yeah, I really focus a lot on supporting gut health with these clients, and again, detoxifying estrogen. There's one client that comes to mind that had, I would say, the most like most extreme transformation. It was like in a matter of like 2 to 3 months, she had gone from like vomiting during her periods from pain to then like 3 months later, I think it was like maybe I think it's like 2 cycles later, she was hiking on day 3 of her cycle. And
That's wild.
she was like, I wanted to go hiking. I felt good enough to go hiking. And, here in the Northwest, we have these amazing hiking trails. And so it was just like so like fulfilling for me to hear that, where it's like, not only is she improving her like fertile potential, right? Like she's bringing her body into a state where she's going to be more receptive to a pregnancy, but she's also like significantly improving her quality of life. And for women who have endo, it's like debilitating. Like I had period pain. Like I don't know if I had endo. I honestly never like got it tested. But I don't have any other signs of autoimmunity. And it's one of those things where like I cannot imagine being in this person's shoes, right? Like the level of pain that they experience every month. And so to be able to have that kind of impact is just so like, I think so encouraging. And especially when like conventional medicine, they don't have many options, right? It's like take birth control, which can be helpful, right? Like one of the reasons why they use birth control for endometriosis patients is to minimize the overall inflammation in the uterine area and the ovaries, because it can contribute to aging fertility if you have so much oxidative stress in that area. And there has been, it has been shown to reduce oxidative stress and extend one's fertility, because they still have that better egg quality without that inflammation around. But, I will say like birth control, it is a Band-Aid, right? Like if you do eventually want to get pregnant and you do eventually want to not have to live on birth control, like you can address the root cause to some extent, right? Like, again, there's this genetic factor, there's this, under endometriosis, when we look at it metabolically, it's the exact opposite of PCOS. So it's
That's
so
nice to think of those two things as the exact opposite.
yeah. So estrogen, people might be wondering like, well, you said estrogen dominance is part of both of them. It is interesting, one of the reasons why estrogen dominance can be a part of PCOS as well is that it's related to high testosterone levels. And also with the excess body fat, you're converting some of that testosterone into estrogen. There's an enzyme in the body fat aromatase that converts testosterone into estrogen. And so that's why you can have that high testosterone and high estrogen state. So anyway, so that's kind of, one of the things that I would consider with both PCOS and endometriosis. But there's a lot more to it. So that's kind of a surface level.
Okay. Hopefully you can hear me, but Somebody asked, you talk about oxidative stress. Can you explain that?
Yeah. Oxidative stress is kind of a collective or an umbrella term for things that require more antioxidants in your body. We have antioxidants that we make, like melatonin or glutathione. We also have antioxidants that we eat. Um, and so there's, when I try to help people combat oxidative stress, I'm always focusing on like how do we support like both optimizing antioxidant consumption, but also making your own internal antioxidants more effectively. And oxidative stress again is a overall stressor in the body. So inflammation is probably one of the more common sources of oxidative stress. Inflammation is one of those things that is associated with a lot of different conditions. It can be associated with autoimmunity, like I said, endometriosis and PCOS. Um, it's one of those things where we also want to look to our diet and say like, okay, do we have our essential fatty acids balanced, right? Like omega-6 to omega-3 balance. Is that kind of at an optimal ratio? Many people in the modern world have not enough omega-3 and too much omega-6. Other things that can contribute to inflammation might be actually eating too many muscle meats and not enough bone and skin on meats. Balancing out the methionine balance, for example. That's one of the amino acids found in muscle meats. So there's a lot of different things that can contribute to inflammation in the body. Some of the more obvious ones that I often forget because they've never been a part of my own lifestyle have been like smoking or, alcohol, a lot of like, scented candles and, like those types of things that are
Bath
just
and
going
Body
to,
Works.
sorry? Oh,
Like
Bath
Bath
and Body
and
Works.
Body
Oh,
Works.
I cannot stand walking by that store. Um, Yeah, and so thinking about a lot of the things that are going to burn through your own antioxidants, right? And we use our antioxidants in our liver to detoxify as well. We use them in our ovaries to maintain our egg quality. Many women, as they're aging, have reduced antioxidants in their ovaries, and they have increased oxidative stress in their ovaries. And so it's kind of you know, a mismatch in the sense of like if we're trying to maintain egg quality as you age. And so that's why I definitely have a big focus on that, particularly with my clients over 35. And so really trying to support um, liver detoxification and all of the nutrition that's going to support optimal flow, like producing bile and releasing it and pooping and making sure that you're eliminating everything. Because if you're backed up in one of those areas, like maybe you don't have the nutrients to be able to effectively detoxify. So then I have this like image in my course of you're like a conveyor belt, kind of like a manufacturing plant. And it's like, there's like this backup of like processing that happens when you don't have the right tools, right? Maybe one person didn't show up for work today and you can't move things down the conveyor belt. Um, so, those are some definitely different areas to be focusing on if we want to improve our levels of oxidative stress. And of course, like, what feels like a very obvious one is also just stress, like emotional
Yeah.
stress, like toxic thoughts,
Yeah.
perpetuating, anxiety, like those types of things can also be a source of oxidative stress.
So, getting into the last few questions here, do you feel somebody was asking about age, like anybody over 35 or those that are higher in age, closer to 40, a little bit over 40, mid 40s, like the oxidative stress and paying attention to that is the biggest kind of bang for your buck you can do?
Yes. So I would say yes, reducing oxidative stress and improving all of the things that I mentioned that support progesterone. Those are also going to be the things that support egg quality because in order to be able to produce enough progesterone, you have to have good egg quality. And so as you're aging, the way I like to look at this, and I think a lot of times people think, oh, I'm running out of eggs the older I get. And that's not necessarily the case. Your body does release less eggs with each cycle. Um, but it's kind of like because it's holding on to them, right? It wants to make sure you have enough. And you really don't run out of eggs until you stop ovulating. And so if you think about like quality versus quantity, let's say you had 10 eggs that you were releasing at age 40 and you had 20 eggs that you were releasing at age 20. I'm just making up numbers here, but essentially you're releasing half the amount of eggs with a 10-year difference. But let's say like when you were 20, you were partying all the time and just smoking a lot and like staying up all the time and like just really didn't eat well at all and like didn't take care of yourself, all those things. But then if you're like 40, right, and you're actually taking care of yourself, you're reducing oxidative stress, doing all of those things, yes, you still have a higher risk of pregnancy loss just because there might still be more DNA damage on those eggs. But the like you might have like 8 of those eggs have good egg quality, 8 of those 10 versus like let's say 5 of the 20, right? So it's like you have to really look at like how do we maximize like overall egg quality. And no, we're not going to be in control of everything, and we're not going to be able to like if you prepare for conception and you do everything, like we can't guarantee that you're going to get pregnant or be able to maintain a pregnancy, but you're going to bring yourself into a much better state of like having the chances of doing so. And I think that's another encouraging piece, is that a lot of times people think that at a certain age they're going to run out of fertility, or
Yeah,
um,
that's what, like, mainstream medicine has led our culture to believe.
right. And so I think just to kind of plant the seed that if you make changes now, right, like the earlier you make changes, the more you can extend your reproductive longevity, right? Just as you can extend
That's
your
beautiful.
delay menopause, for example. A lot of times people are talking about, like, okay, how do I delay menopause? Like you delay menopause by taking care of your fertility. And, by doing so, you're extending your reproductive longevity. And so, I know of someone who she got pregnant at 43, or maybe she was 44. She had lost several pregnancies leading up to that, and then she made a ton of lifestyle change and was able to finally get pregnant and have her baby. And it's like, you
Love that.
know,
Yeah,
you can still do it. It might take more effort. And
right.
so, if you have the opportunity, if you're married, if you're happy with the person who you're married to, you think they're going to be a good father, and you're like able to get pregnant, that, or at least like prepare yourself to do that on the earlier side. Um, Not everybody has that. I know for you, like you didn't meet your person until a little bit later. You
I was
might have
37.
had, right. My mom was 37 when she met my dad, and she had my brother. She got pregnant on the first try with my brother and got pregnant on the first try with me. She had me at 40. So for me, that's always very encouraging. She lived
Yeah,
a very different lifestyle because she grew up in Iran where there wasn't, all the stuff that we have here. Um, and
dang, that's awesome.
they didn't have the privilege of having processed foods.
Yeah. I would tell people now, I said, it might be a good thing because if I would have met my husband at 20, 25, I probably would have wanted like 10 kids because I had such like an awesome experience.
Yeah.
But also I wouldn't know what I know now, and it probably took me 10 years of cleaning up my own closet,
Yeah.
to lead to that amazing experience.
Yeah. And you
Um,
put yourself into that state where once you did meet the right person, you
yeah,
were much more ready.
totally, totally. This has been awesome. Um, Somebody asked, what are your thoughts on ART, assisted reproductive technology like IVF, IUI, and do you work with women leading up to that, or do you,
Hmm.
what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I will work with women who are doing assisted reproductive therapy, or technology. I will just be open and say that I don't have a lot of experience working like hand in hand with women going through that. Um, I I've worked with a few clients who have done that, and a lot of it just seemed really kind of foreign to me with like the different medications that they're taking and that type of thing. But in general, the more optimal you put your fertility, the better you're going to respond to any kind of fertility treatment. So yes, I would be happy to work with somebody who's doing that, in that like preparation period. I will say, however, I have a pretty hard line on surrogacy though. I don't support surrogacy, and I do believe that women who choose to be surrogates should have healthy babies, but that's not a thing I want to support. So I do, like, on my frequently asked questions page on my course, page, it's, I definitely lay it out there, why I don't do it. But yeah, so, but I will say, like, if like I have a client right now who, she's 40 years old and she just started working with me and has a lot of improvements to make, has some thyroid issues. And I think if we could really make a lot of improvements, we'll see how dedicated she is. We might be able to get her pregnant. But the thing is that her husband has very pretty much non, what's the word? No sperm, pretty much.
Oh.
Like, so they've done like some of the kind of more a little more invasive testing and stuff to see like if they can actually retrieve sperm from him and figure out why he's not producing it and things like that. So kind of what we're planning on doing is like bringing her into the most optimal state. And then if they choose to do IVF and they, he's undergoing some like Chinese acupuncture and Chinese medicine and things like that too, to try to see if he can make more sperm, because he's got a like very healthy lifestyle. There's no red flags from my standpoint. Yeah. And so, I was like, maybe there was some trauma, physical trauma. I don't know. So anyway, so this was kind of one of those situations where she's like, I really want to have his babies. And, I get that. Like, if I was in that position, I can't say I wouldn't do fertility treatments, but like, I also personally feel like I don't really want to put my body through that if I don't have to. So
that's what we decided.
I think,
putting your body through it.
Yeah. So I think like if you can put in 110% effort and say like, I've done my part, and my husband has done his part. If we still haven't been able to do that, then there's two options. You can either just accept that, okay, maybe this is God's will, or two, like maybe you're going to go down that route. And I can't make that decision for people. But I'm here to help them bring themselves to the most optimal state if they choose whatever route they choose to do.
Right. And whether the end result is pregnancy or not, you're probably going to feel better, to get your body in that optimal state.
Right. Exactly. Like, what's the worst that can happen? I have another person in my course right now who, she's not sure if she wants to have another child, but she's really like wants to, but part of her is like, oh, I have some other health stuff going on that I need to figure out first. And, what's the worst that can happen? I get into a more healthy state, So
I'm glad you touched on the male, because I know we haven't even touched on that this episode, and we won't, but maybe your husband will make a resilient fatherhood course or something. But
I do address male fertility a lot throughout my course. So I'm speaking primarily to the woman because that's who's seeking out care most of the time. But I do have especially certain video lessons directed specifically towards the male. And most of the, like, I would say 80% of the recommendations are for both of them. And so I specify when it might be different.
So where can people find you, find your course? What are the details?
Yeah.
I'm sure people will sign up right after this.
So my website is anisawoodall.com, and it's just my first name and last name. ANISAWOODALL.com. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at Anisa Woodall Nutrition. And you can find everything on my website or through my Instagram. And like I said, I have that estrogen dominance workshop coming up towards the end of February. I also have a seasonal meal plan membership for hormone vitality that I have. I release them, with the spring equinox. So coming up March 20th, summer solstice, fall equinox. So seasonal meal plans directed for women who want to have hormone vitality. It's a 28-day meal plan. And it's a really nice, stepping stone for people who want to make a change, but they don't know how much change they want to make or need to make yet.
Heck yeah.
So yeah, those are some of the other offerings that I have, but I also have a affiliate link for you for Resilient Motherhood, so you can share that. So if you're listening to this episode and you want to support the BIRTHFIT podcast, then use her affiliate link and to get into Resilient Motherhood.
I love it. I love what you do. I'm so glad that you've kind of like followed your calling, your niche. Anything you want to leave the audience with for fertility, preconception? Oh, actually, this is a really great question. And I totally forgot to ask this. This was on the thing. And this might spark something, but how can you prepare if somebody has a young one and they're like, I want to have another one, within the next, like they're less than a year apart. Or somebody asked, okay, I just found out I'm 6 weeks pregnant and I have a 6-month-old.
Yeah. Ideally, if you can be in control of it, I definitely recommend at least an 18-month gap. Ideally, it's, when you look at the research, the best outcomes for moms and babies are 3 to 5 years. In our culture, that's just, most women are waiting to have kids and it's just not doable. And so one of the things that, again, I like to look at is like, okay, do you have your cycle back? Are you ovulating regularly? How do you feel, right? Like, does your fertility feel optimal? And if not, like, depending on how fast you want to start the process, like maybe we do some nutrient testing. We see exactly where we need to fill some gaps, and just increase the concentration of your diet, right? Like the nutrient density of your diet, right? Cool. And so that's where I would definitely take a more personalized approach with somebody to, I definitely wouldn't do it less than 12 months. There is a lot more risk with that. And so just with respect to the mom, and her emotions and the family and the baby, I would really wait at least 12 months after giving birth to like getting pregnant again. But
cool. And then the last question, anything you want to leave the audience with?
So I didn't go into this when I first started out, and I guess it's part of my like how I started specializing in fertility story. But one of the reasons why I got into preconception nutrition was because I was working with a lot of women. I worked at an integrative health clinic with a lot of other like naturopathic doctors, and I was seeing a wide collection of women from from children to like menopause, right? And one of the things I noticed the most was if we had made a change when the woman was in her younger reproductive years, we could have prevented so many of the health problems and outcomes that they experienced, whether it was gestational diabetes or, hypertension, high blood pressure in pregnancy, or having a emergency C-section or a preterm birth, or, just postpartum depression, right? Like anything that happens as a woman is kind of moving through that transition from like maiden to motherhood to like raising kids, or even like when she's raising kids, but she doesn't know how to take care of herself. She's like totally depleted and all of those things. Like I found that like the more I like got to the root, right, like was preventing. And I think, in the bio, I say like I address the smoke before your house burns down. That's really like the approach that I like to take. It's like, you don't wait for like everything to be horrible before you do something. You don't wait to have a traumatic birth before you prepare for pregnancy. Unfortunately, a lot of the women who find me, it's because they had a horrible first pregnancy and they're like, I want to do everything in my power to like rewrite that story.
Yeah.
And so for women who are in those younger reproductive years, or maybe you're still like a maiden and you haven't crossed that threshold into motherhood yet, or even if you had, but you like want to have a better experience next time, know that like it's never too late to improve things. And the more you optimize your fertility, the better your health is going to be.
I love that. Oh, leave it there because like the more you optimize your fertility, the smoother, the easier, the better your health's going to be through that whole motherhood transition, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Uh, awesome. Okay, I won't take any more of your time. Both moms here. She's got 2 boys. She's got to go probably play catch with real quick. Like get out of the off the headphones and into the backyard. Thank you so much, Anisa. And y'all go check her program out, go sign up, do whatever you got to do, prepare yourself for conception, for the next baby, whatever you got to do. Thank you so much, Anisa. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad you're doing your work in this world.
Thank you. And you too. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I definitely listened to the podcast as like my preparation for my first home birth for a long time. So it was like one of the only like sources of home birth stories that I was getting. So
I
it was
love that.
definitely great.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Go enjoy your day. I appreciate it. And we'll be sending women straight to your website.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.